Hi, this is Lisa Slowpeck, formerly Lisa Cinco, Hollywood historian, and I wanted to talk to you about Peg Entwistle. Recently watched the Netflix Hollywood Ryan Murphy limited series and was disappointed. I love Ryan Murphy usually. I love American Horror Story, Feud, 911. I did not like Hollywood. He got Peg wrong. And I know it was a revisionist history, but I think he disrespected her. Um, so I wanted to talk to you about some myths about Peg and setting the record straight. 10 years ago, I put a headstone on her grave. And I knew her brother Milton up until his death in February of 2018. He was 100. He was about halfway through his 100th year. He would have been 101 on September 29th of that year had he lived. Peg did not commit suicide over 13 women. That's one of the biggest myths of all. And I know a lot of people ask me, and that's the biggest question I always hear is, why did she commit suicide? First of all, she was not an alcoholic, as Hollywood depicts her. She had no alcohol in her system when they did the autopsy. And she was never known to be a drinker. Her ex-husband, Robert Keith, was a violent alcoholic when they were married. And so she never really went near the stuff. So he got her wrong on that point. He should have at least researched her when he wanted to basically revolve the whole entire series around her. You would think he would have at least researched her a little bit, but he didn't. Peg committed suicide for some various reasons. In her suicide note, she states, "I'm sorry for everything." Okay. I'm going to tell you the everything. First off, she was fired from RKO. And she had a hard time finding work. But she was not upset about, she was upset, but she didn't commit suicide over what happened with 13 women. She did the Mad Hopes with Humphrey Bogart and Billy Burke, and she got 13 women, and her role was butchered mainly because in the book 13 Women, her character was a lesbian, and the censors went a little nutty over that. Even though it really didn't depict her as a lesbian in the movie, I guess with the production code being the way it was, the censors didn't like the whole idea of it, and that's why the role was butchered. She had a hard time finding work, and she had an apartment in New York with 2 roommates, Mary and Marta, and she could not return to New York. She didn't really have the money. They lost their apartment. She felt very upset about that, very guilty. She had to move in with her Uncle Charles and Aunt Jane in California, and they had a friend living with them, and they had to ask that friend to move out. So she felt guilty about that. She was still in love with her ex-husband, Robert Keith. And as I said, they were only married a couple years, but during that time, it wasn't a very happy marriage. He was an abusive alcoholic. And she ended up divorcing him over that. But when he got remarried, he sobered up and he had a very successful marriage and revived his acting career. And I'm sure she was probably wondering, well, why didn't he get sober for me? She was actually wearing a necklace that he bought her on the night that she jumped. And it had a dent on it from the fall. And her brother Milton still had it. I don't know. I'm sure that her family still has the necklace. David O. Selznick gave her 13 women, but she was up for bill divorcement with Billy Burke. David wanted her for the role of the daughter. He felt that she was more believable in that role as Billy Burke's daughter. George Cukor wanted Katharine Hepburn, and Cukor got his way. Things might have been different for her had she gotten that role. That was a disappointment. Although I don't believe that had anything to do with her suicide. But I do believe, had she gotten that role, the fates would have been different for her. Because she did not get that role, David O. Selznick gave her 13 women. He cast her in that role. Peg did not want to be a Hollywood star. She did not want to be a film star. She wanted to be a Broadway star. Broadway was her love. And she had every intention on returning to New York and making a Broadway comeback. But she did want to preserve her craft on film. So she was disappointed that her role was butchered in 13 Women, but it was not the reason she committed suicide, as everybody has said over the last 88 years that was her reasoning. It was not. And then after she jumped and died, there was always the myth that a few days after she died, that there was a letter that came that she got a role from the Beverly Hills Playhouse or some other playhouse that stated that she was offered a role of a woman that commits suicide. That's a myth. She did get a letter. It was from Archaea Studios. She was offered a role, one picture deal. Milton told me that it had nothing to do with a woman committing suicide. He told me that he doesn't know what happened to the letter. His uncle Charles was so upset that he believes that he ripped up the letter and threw it away. But no one really knows what happened to the letter. He was livid because Archaea had their phone number. And the letter was dated either the day before or the day of her suicide. And they could have easily picked up the phone and called her to offer her that deal. They didn't have to write her a letter. That is why he was so angry. So that is a myth. So these, I hope that me talking to you about this, I hope this kind of puts to rest some things, some questions at least that you may have in your mind about why she did it. Also, I'll put this out here, that her mother, her biological mother, Emily Entwistle, lost custody of Peg when she was a child due to mental illness. Peg did have bouts of depression, but 1932, nobody went to therapy. We really don't know what she had. She could have had bipolar disorder or just depression, but she definitely had some mental issues on top of everything else. It was like a perfect storm. And, mental illness is hereditary. So we really don't know. We honestly don't know, what she had or what she was diagnosed with. And obviously, she was not medicated. They didn't have medications for that back then. Um, or any good ones, I guess you could say. Um, Her mother did not die when she was a child. She was probably institutionalized in England somewhere. Um, but no one really knows what happened to her mother after she lost custody, and her and Peg's father Robert divorced her. So, and anyone is free to contact me and ask a question um, at any time. I'm on Twitter at Star Historian, and I'm also on Facebook at the same handle. You're free to contact me at any time. And have a good evening. Thanks. Bye.